The Time of the End Timeline Study, Part 4. In Part 3 of our study, we learned that the second seal, red horse, symbolizes Iran. The third seal, black horse, symbolizes Russia, and the fourth seal, pale horse, symbolizes Egypt and Africa. The assignments of the four spiritual horses of Revelation 6 and Zechariah 6. The time of the end will be less than 70 or 80 years. It has been over 9 years since the first seal was opened on 9/11/2001. The second seal has not yet been opened. In Part 3, we learned that the Antichrist will arise in the Middle East before the third seal. Notice in Daniel, after them a king will arise different from the earlier ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. However, it appears the Antichrist does not subdue the 3 kings until after the third seal. The Antichrist arises between the second seal and the third seal. In Revelation 17, it appears that all 10 Middle Eastern kings are involved in the destruction of end-time Babylon. The beast and the 10 horns will hate the prostitute and bring her to ruin. They will burn her with fire. Revelation 17:16. Daniel 11 describes the same sequence. First, he, the Antichrist, will attack the mightiest fortresses, superpowers, with the help of a foreign god, with the help of foreign power. Then he will subdue 3 of the 10 kings. Here's what Daniel says. Then, at the time of the end, the Antichrist will invade many countries, also the beautiful land. Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. This brings us to the end of the first 4 seals of Revelation. The Antichrist has risen to world power at the head of the Middle Eastern kingdom with its 7 heads and 10 horns. He has invaded Israel and confirmed a covenant, a treaty, with many nations. Daniel tells us how much longer the time of the end will be once the covenant is confirmed by the Antichrist. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7, 7 years until the end, once the covenant is signed. When Antichrist confirms the covenant, Israel will have peace and safety until the abomination that causes desolation. In Thessalonians, we're told, while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come upon them suddenly as labor pains. The covenant is confirmed for 7 years. In the middle of that, the abomination that causes desolation. Daniel says the abomination that causes desolation is in the middle of the last 7. He will confirm a covenant for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. Daniel 9:27. It is the abomination that causes desolation in the middle of the last 7 years, which starts the Great Tribulation. Christ told us about this in Matthew 24:15 through 21. Let's read an excerpt of what he said. When you see, standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel, those in Judea must flee immediately to the mountains, for then there will be great tribulation, unequaled from the beginning of the world. Matthew 24:15 through 21. The last 7 years, the Antichrist confirms a covenant of peace and safety. After 3.5 years, the Antichrist sets up the abomination that causes desolation. The abomination starts 3.5 years of great tribulation. At first, Israel relies on the Antichrist for their peace and safety. Then, after the abomination, the Antichrist persecutes Israel with the Great Tribulation. Do other prophecies describe this situation? Yes. In Isaiah 10, we see the same situation described. Isaiah refers to the Antichrist as the Assyrian, the king of Assyria. We should note that Iraq is in the territory of ancient Assyria. Isaiah says this about the Antichrist. In that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of the house of Jacob, will no longer rely on him, the Assyrian, also known as the Antichrist, who struck them down, but will truly rely on Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. Isaiah 10:20. Let's review the last 7 years again. The Antichrist, the Assyrian, confirms a covenant of peace and safety. After 3.5 years, the Antichrist sets up the abomination that causes desolation. The abomination starts 3.5 years of great tribulation. The Time of the End Timeline Study, Part 4. In Part 5, we will examine what happens during the last 3.5 years, called the Great Tribulation.